In this video we're going to be shooting some festive mulled wine and I'm going to be giving you a few tips on flat lay photography. What's up YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. This channel is everything to do with photography, so if that interests you then click subscribe down below. This is part 2 of our Christmas series and I'm going to be shooting some nice festive mulled wine. This is something I've really missed this year because I've not been able to get to the Christmas market as it's been cancelled due to COVID, so I thought I'll get some mulled wine in the house and we'll get some nice pictures of it. I shot the mulled wine as a flat lay, and while doing this I'm going to give you some really useful tips on creating your own flat lay photography, which is a really great way of photographing food. There's so many great ways that food can be photographed using flat lays. It's a really good way to get a story in your image, as the angle is as if you were looking down on a scene, exactly how you would be if you were maybe prepping something or serving something or looking at a big table scene. Flat lays have become a lot more popular, especially over Instagram, with things like influencers and bloggers kind of displaying bits and bobs just out. What a flat lay is everything laid flat on a surface and your camera held at a 90-degree angle above it all to get the picture of the whole scene. Now we've talked a little bit about what a flat lay is, I'm going to go ahead and get right into the tips. So tip 1 is background. When picking your background for a flat lay, we need to make sure it's something really nice and not too distracting, as you're going to see a lot of the background in the photo. It's not like shooting at a 45-degree angle where most of it's going to be out of focus or covered in props or in the very background. Your background is going to cover about half to most of the image when shooting a flat lay. Because this is our Christmas series, I'm going to be using my DIY wood background again for this one, which is the kind of theme I'm running through this series. This is a nice background, it's got some nice texture and a nice kind of simple colour. There's not too many colours in there to make it too distracting. So now we've picked our background, tip 2 is to get your camera attached overhead, so rigged up however suits you best. Some people do that with C-stands. Some people even kind of get the full goalpost setup and then have an adapter on to hold your camera, which is really good. Or what I use is a tripod with an overhead arm. So you can either get extension arms to go onto a normal tripod, or like this one, you can find one which already has the ability to go over at 90-degree angles. Whichever works best for you. I like using the tripod because it also helps me do it on location without having to carry around an absolute abundance of kit. If you're interested in getting one of these tripods yourself, I will have it linked in the description below, just like I do in all of my other videos anyway. But now you know why I picked that one. So the reason this is a tip is it's really good to make sure it's nice and stable and it's going to be in the same place. This is going to allow you the freedom to work around your set, and you know it's not going to move. So when you've got it in that good position, it's going to be staying there until everything's done. It also means that if you need to, you can increase your shutter speed, especially if you're using natural light. You might need to have that shutter speed a little bit longer, and holding your camera overhead is not going to be possible. Fortunately for me, I've actually got a flip out screen on my camera, which does make shooting flat lays a lot easier. Or you can tether to a computer or your phone, just so you can see what's going on and you don't need to stand on a stool to have a look. So these tips aren't die-hard rules for flat lays. If you want to go ahead and do something different, that is completely up to you. These are just my tips from when I'm shooting flat lays. So tip 3 is something that I absolutely try to make sure I do in every flat lay that I take photos of. One thing I do love to do on every flat lay is using a spirit level. Make sure the camera is exactly parallel to the background, so it's not wonky this way or that way. My tripod does have a little spirit level on it, but this is just making sure the tripod is straight. Sometimes obviously the camera is not going to be exactly straight to the tripod. So just having a little spirit level on top makes it so much easier. The reason I find this really important is because one of the great things about flat lays is you can spin them around and they can be just as appealing. It's not going to look like something's falling off as if you were taking it straight on. If your camera isn't exactly parallel to the background and exactly flat, it might look fine on the one angle that you take it on, but when you turn the image around, it's going to look like everything's starting to fall off a little bit. Being able to use them landscape and portrait can be really helpful when putting them on Instagram or your website. Sometimes it's better to have it landscape on your website because you may be looking at it on a computer, big landscape screen. But then on Instagram, it's best to have it slightly portrait. That's another really great reason to make sure your flat lays can be flipped. Obviously, other types of photography you can't do this on, so it's one really good tip for flat lays. So they are all of my tips for setting up your flat lay. Now I want to go on to more of the visual elements of a flat lay. So tip number 4 is going to be picking your subject. So when you're wanting to shoot a flat lay, make sure you pick a subject with a lot or all of its visual detail on the top. So things like soups, tarts and pizzas, they work really, really well for flat lays and not so much at straight on angle. That's not to say that you can't shoot a burger as a flat lay or a pizza straight on. It's just generally that's how they would be shown because it makes it a little bit easier to be able to see it on top, and they work best for flat lays, but honestly it's completely up to you. You're just going to have to maybe work around it a bit differently if you were wanting to try something like a burger as a flat lay. So my tip number 5, it's your composition in a flat lay. So composition is just how and where your main subjects are placed in a photograph. Having a good composition helps your eye flow through a photograph, and it's a bit more pleasing than just things being randomly dotted about wherever you want. Composition is really important with flat lays because you're seeing everything in the scene. Nothing's in the background or foreground. It makes composition a lot more important because that's one way that we can make it clear which element in the photo is our main subject. If you have quite a busy composition, it's going to be really hard to draw it in onto a certain area of an image. Using the right kind of composition helps you draw all of the attention into one area. So the composition technique I used for this image is one commonly used in flat lays, and it's to make an S with the subject, which helps draw your eye from one end through to the other without it getting too distracted and drawing too much attention away from the subject. So here's the image with all of the main elements already placed, and you can literally draw a line right through the subject, creating a nice S shape. So now we're on to tip number 6, and this is about props and food. So similar with the composition, it's quite hard on a flat lay to make sure that your subject is very obviously a subject. When you're shooting straight on at a 45-degree angle, you can use a lot of the props that you want to use in the background or the foreground, having them maybe out of focus so your eye is easily drawn to your main subject. When we're shooting with a flat lay, everything is seen equally and normally everything is in focus. This means that when choosing props, you have to be quite careful not to go overboard on the props, which will distract from the main subject. One thing that does work really well with flat lays is using ingredients as your props for your food. This works really well for flat lays because it sets a bit more of a scene, as if someone's maybe preparing some food and they're just there, like you would be baking a cake and you'd have the ingredients to the side. It also makes it not so distracting because they would tend to draw in more than distracting from your subject. The ingredients I decided to go for with this shoot was some dried oranges. And as you probably already guessed, I'm no professional cook. I do not bake, I do not do anything, but I did dry these oranges myself. I just chopped them as thinly as I could and popped them in a preheated oven for about an hour and a half. So just turning them every 30 minutes. So using these oranges as my main props in this image didn't take away from the mulled wine. The orange colour complemented the red mulled wine really nicely, and you would tend to have some slices of oranges with the mulled wine. So it set more of a story. It added to the story of the photo instead of taking it away or distracting from the mulled wine. I also used some autumn leaves which were very similar colour to the dried oranges and gave it that really nice autumny warm feeling. Because they're a very similar colour, they're not too distracting. If I had something that was bright blue in there, the first thing you'd be able to see was the thing that was bright blue because it's got the biggest area of contrast in the image. I hope you found these tips helpful, guys. I know there's so much more I could talk about flat lays, but I didn't want to end up with a 2-hour long video, and it gives me a chance to maybe go through and discuss some more techniques in the future. If you guys use any of these tips for your own flat lays, then I'd love to see what you create on Instagram, so tag me at amphotographeruk and let me know in the comments if there's something I didn't mention that you really like to do in a flat lay. Thank you so much, guys. Give this video a thumbs up and I'll see you in the next video. Merry Christmas!